Now, in Burundi, under CRED, we have a project that is being implemented. The guy who was supposed to be here to present it is called Interreligious Council of Burundi, IRCB. Interreligious Council of Burundi, IRCB. In French, they say CICB. So what is it that they were doing? They were promoting dialogues. But now there's a difference between them and what's happening in Ethiopia. In Burundi, the context is different. So a question, what exactly was the issue that they were dealing with? Now, a bit of history of Burundi. It has a very sad history because the issue has nothing to do with religion. Burundi is predominantly, it's like 90% Christian and 62% Catholic, Roman Catholic. So at one time, Roman Catholics were like 85% of the Burundians. So it's heavily a Catholic society because of the history of the country. So the issue has nothing to do with religion. It is more to do with politics. And so Burundi has a very sad history. It's one of the countries, just like the neighboring Rwanda. It has a history of what, from an academic perspective, because I'm an academic, I would say mass massacres, where people kill a lot of people, not one, not two, not three, not 10, not 10,000. You are killing people in terms of 100,000. So we call them mass massacres. Some, when you read some works, they call them genocide. There's a scholar who has called this the Burundi, the first country in Central Africa to witness genocide. 1972, the Burundian army, which was dominated by one group called the Tutsi, and then they moved from village to village, killing Hutu people. And in a period of less than 100 days, figures are disputed. They say in a period of like less than 100 days, they had massacred 100,000 people. Now, some scholars talk of 300,000 people. That's not easy, yeah? That's 1972. It's written and the studies are there. And then they continue dominating. So in 1976, when there was a coup, then again, there was another list of mass massacres, 10,000 people dead. In 1981, there were some issues. Again, another 10,000 people dead. 1988, again, there was a crisis and a coup when President Buyoya came to power. He overthrew his cousin, Jean Baptiste Bagaza. And then, I think that time they killed more, they killed like 50,000 people. And then 1993, that one is very famous because after they held the democratic elections in 1993, and for the first time in the history of Burundi, Hutu won elections. And in less than 90 days, there was an attempted coup. And so the guy was overthrown. And then it caused mass anger in the country. And in a period of less than 100 days, more than 200,000 people had been killed. So it took the intervention of the internationals. So there's this, because of this history of mass massacres, there's what we would call mass trauma and the problem of coexistence. 2015, now I've jumped a number of years there and what happened, including the changes. 2015, between 2010, after now the 1993, the country went to civil war. And the civil war ran for the next 10 years. So the first major agreement was signed. It was mediated by President Nelson Mandela. That time I was working for a code, so we happened to be working on the Burundi case studies. It was actually one of the files I was dealing with. And they signed what is called Arusha Peace Agreement because it was signed in Arusha in Tanzania. And they said, and they held elections in 2005, and a new government came to power led by President Peter or PL Nkurunziza. And the Arusha Agreement stipulated that there will be transitional period, a certain number, then there will be elections, and then there will be, now they continue holding democratic elections. And President Peter Nkurunziza won, and then he ran for the second term and he won. But in 2015, he wanted to run for a third term, and there was resistance in the country. Now, President Nkurunziza happens to be an evangelical. So he's actually a pastor. He was a pastor. He died recently. He was a pastor. His wife is also a pastor, had a church. Now, the country, as I said, is majority Catholic. So the Catholic Church and the others, they took a position and said, no, you can't continue for the third term. And then there was an attempted military coup in 2015. And that drove the country back to the civil war. So are we together at that point? We are together. My brother, I trained you sometimes in Ethiopia, if I may remember, in Addis, on the same issues of peace in Africa. So we are together at that point. And we were with the bishop, the Anglican bishop. It's not you. No. When we were in Addis, we had a bishop from Burundi. You may remember well. So anyway, the president was an evangelical. The Catholics who are the majority said, no, you can't continue. You need to obey the requirements of the Arusha agreement. The country has sunk back to civil war. Now there is fear of mass massacres like in the past. And 300,000 people cross the border as refugees. Some went to Tanzania, others went to Congo. If you know where Burundi is, the nearest you can go, it is either Tanzania or DRC. Because they fear going to Rwanda. Those are the only three countries that border the country. What happened is that now the CR, because of this fear, the Interreligious Council decided to come with a project in which they would try to help the communities live together and address the issues to do with the political conflict. It's not religious. But because of this division between the Catholics who are the majority and the evangelicals who are minority, now they are supporting a president. The Catholics are opposed to the president. There is a military coup that is happening and everybody is in shock. They decided to come together and bring communities together. And the project we had was small. We didn't have a lot of money to give to grants to them. So they decided to do their project implementation in 4 areas. One is called Bujumbura City. Bujumbura is the capital city of Burundi. The other one is called Bujumbura Rural, which is this area surrounding Bujumbura City. And then there's another area called Rumonge. Why did they choose Rumonge? As I say, there have been mass massacres in the past. Now, the challenge with Burundi is that majority of the soldiers or the generals who are leading soldiers who had perpetrated mass killings in the past, and they were leading the military, they happened to come from Rumonge. Rumonge and its neighbor Burundi. We used to call it Burundi at one time, then it was split into 2. They happened to come from there. All the previous presidents, starting from Michael Michobero, who was a soldier, Jean Baptiste Bagaza, who was a soldier, Pierre Buyoya, who was a soldier, and even the soldiers who attempted to overthrow the one who killed the president in 1993, all of them happen to come from there. So it was important to reassure the communities there that despite all these challenges, we can still coexist peacefully. And they choose the method of promoting community dialogues through interfaith approach. So anyway, that was the point. We should be clear now that they were trying to address these issues, but using an interfaith approach, because that is the only method that could be acceptable to the community. Because majority are Catholics, when you use Catholic priests and you tell them the generals may have been Catholics, the population that was killed were Catholics, but it is not religion that is killing them, so we can bring you together. So IRCP were working on that project and they were bringing those communities together in the 4 areas. So the fourth one, the location that I need to mention is called Muyinga. IRCB chose the location because Burundi, there is a small population of Muslims. And for some historical reasons, all the Muslims happen to be concentrated in one area. They happen to be in that location called Muyinga, near the border with Rwanda. So what happens? The Muslims were fearing because one of their sons, Hussein Rajabu, who is a Muslim, had been arrested and put in prison on suspicion of trying to stage a coup d'etat. Are we together up to that point? Eh? So the Muslims were fearing now that the Christians apparently have now supposedly won. They have now gotten our son who attempted to stage a coup. What will happen to us as Muslims? We shall be targeted, and given the history of massacres in Burundi, we shall be massacred. So IRCB decided, let's go and work with this group so that we can assure them, we address their fear, and then we address questions of reconciliation, bringing people together, and we can only use the interfaith approach. So they came now with this idea of dialogues, train pastors and sheikhs in conflict resolution, in promotion of dialogue, and then send them to the communities, and they start addressing the concerns of different communities in different areas. Now, Bujumbura city was a capital city. It was a site when the crisis was there in 2015, it became the site of the security. That's where now the protesters were crashing with the security forces. So there was a lot of human rights violations in the area. So they needed to be addressed. Bujumbura Rural happened to be the home of an armed opposition group known as Paripehutu, FNL. Paripehutu FNL was founded, means, Paripehutu now in very simple terms means the movement for the liberation of the Hutu people. Remember we said in the past, it is the Tutsi army killing the Hutu. So the Hutu had come with a movement called an armed group. They were actually fighting, led by a gentleman that I also trained in conflict resolution known as Agathon Rwasa. So they were saying, we now need a movement for the liberation of the Hutu people. And they happened to be in Bujumbura Rural. It was their heartland. So IRCB chose the 4 locations because each had very specific requirements and they needed to address that. So one of the most important cases that are exciting about that intervention is that, which was a big achievement, is that one of our partners, the head of the IRCB, was a Tutsi from Rumonge. Remember, and himself happened to have been a soldier in the Burundian army. So obviously, having participated in the coups of the past, having seen the massacres, there is no way he would have gone to a place like Bujumbura Rural in his lifetime. Why? He was in the army, he was a Tutsi, he knew what the army had done. Bujumbura Rural is the heartland of the Hutu people. There is no way he would have gone there. So when we started the project, and there were some activities taking place in Bujumbura Rural, the guy had to go there and support his team. What shocked him was that through the project, the people of Bujumbura Rural were able to ask. This is somebody who was a minister for education for 5 years, and he never set his foot in Bujumbura Rural. Minister for education in a military government, came to power and never set his foot in a location. Why? It was the heartland of the Hutu fighters. But through creed, through this project, he was able to now to go to Bujumbura Rural. And what shocked him is that he was accepted. And people were even taking a photo with him and saying now that we can now discuss the past. So the idea that all the pain of the past are healing was a shock to him. He died recently. So that was a very huge achievement, even for us. There are many others outside. The guy who was supposed to come here would have talked about all of them, the achievements in rural and all the other areas. But in summary, that is what they were doing. And you can see the power of this aspect of grassroots peace building. We knew when we started the project that we may not change the entire spectrum of the country. We may not be able to transfer the entire mindset of the militaries or the coup d'etats. But as they say, such will tell you that that's exactly what they do. Changing mindset even in small communities is a big contribution to the peace, and it can help the communities live together. So are we together up to that point? So that's Burundi. And Bilali would have talked more about it and the achievement. I have a lot of videos I can show you about all this, but now we don't have time for that. I'll share maybe online some of the videos. Then you can see what they've been doing and their achievements. But basically, that's the power. But in terms of the advantages and all the others, Irma covered all of them. So good. South Sudan is not very different from Burundi, but their context is slightly different. South Sudan seceded from the old republic. When I used to work for Accord, and I used to do a lot of work in Sudan, it was one country. So we used to move from Juba, we would go to Khartoum and so on. And the country had been at war for a very long time. Now, if you do serious studies on Sudan, you find that it's already, in terms of how long the conflict lasted, it is disputed. Some would say the civil war started in 1956. Southerners, they would say that. If you ask the people in Khartoum, they tell you the civil war started in 1963, because that's when the first armed group appeared. But they were in for 12 years. And then they went for a peace agreement in Addis Ababa. Southern Sudanese were around some sort of self-determination, some self-work in South Sudan. Then after only 10 years, they went back to civil war and then fought for another 22 years. And then in 2005, here in this Nairobi here, somewhere here, not far from here, they signed what we call comprehensive peace agreement, which allowed them to have a transition for 5 years, and then they choose whether they want to remain in Sudan or the South Sudan can go on its own. So if you listen to, when you talk about to you'll hear them always talking about Southern Sudanese, right? Talking about, oh, we are fighting the Arabs. Oh, we are fighting the Arabs. We are fighting the Arabs. But when you do serious studies, you may not find that not exactly, may not be a factual statement, but that is the general thinking in the entire country. So in 2011, they decided they voted to be independent. So they moved away from Sudan and they formed the Republic of South Sudan. Now, the Republic of South Sudan happened to be, again, the issue is not religious. I think it's like over 90% Christians, because the Muslims were in the north. Or if not, then they could be like 70. The other, most of them are what I would call the traditional African spiritualities, because they are not neither Christian nor Muslim. They just worship these, either the Dinka gods or the Nuel prophets, and they have all those things in South Sudan. Then 2 years after independence, the independence was in 9 July 2011. Then on 13th December 2013, 13 December 2013, the country exploded. There was one guy who is the president called Salva Kiir Mayardit. The vice president, you know something about South Sudan? So the vice president was this general, Riek Machar Teng. So all of them were in South Sudan People's Liberation Army. So the country exploded because the SPLA split into two, and the government split into two, and they all fought. And they fought between the 13th, all the way up to around January, they were still fighting. Those who went to Juba those days, it was shocking to see bodies in the streets. It was like some sort of mass killings. So, and since then, South Sudan has not gone back to normal, because they kept on having these cycles of war, cycles of violence. This 2013 December, they fought all the way up to around May 2014. Then they stopped fighting between May and sometimes like for several months, with all peace agreements all over the place in Addis Ababa, in Arusha, here in Nairobi, and all over trying to come together. Then they went back to war. In June 2015, I think they fought again. There was an attempted coup and all the, Salva Kiir, there was an attempted coup. They fought. There has been all these international interventions, including peace agreements. Most of them taking place in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. Then they would sign all these peace agreements, which were never implemented. They will sign, then they go back to war. They will sign, they go back to war. So the Evangelical Alliance of South Sudan, Evangelical Alliance of South Sudan, EASS, and another group called Pan-African Christian Women Alliance. They came together and decided we have to do something. We cannot change here the nation. We have, if the AU and the UN has failed, Guterres, it's called Guterres, the Secretary General of the UN, and the Mohammed, the AU Commission chairperson, and all the diplomats, including American foreign diplomats, they have all come to Ethiopia to try and bring South Sudanese together. They have even tried to argue that they can even create 5 positions for president. No, president is one, I think 5 deputy presidents And they created all that. And still, that has not solved the problem. So, Evangelical Alliance of South Sudan, Pan-African Christian women are decided we cannot, if you cannot solve that problem, we can at least deal with the communities. So that because the conflict had become so bad that some people could not even worship in the same churches. Are we together at that point? Some people could not worship in the same churches. You have a Catholic who is a Noel, and you have a Dinka who is a Catholic, and the two cannot worship in the same church. They meet there, they fight. You have a Presbyterian, and now the danger in South Sudan is that the region, just like here in Kenya, is divided. There's a region for Presbyterians where the Presbyterians settled first. There's a region, it's called Upper Nile, the old Upper Nile, covering eastern, western, and southern Upper Nile. Then there is what is called Baragazal, where the Catholics settled first. So the Catholics are there. And then what we call the Equatoria, Central Equatoria, Eastern Equatoria, Western Equatoria, they are evangelicals, are the majority. So you see, even in terms of religion, the society is divided. So the question that was facing Evangelical Alliance of Sudan and Pan-African Christian women was, how are we going to deal with these issues? Pan-African Christian Women Alliance was the thinker of the whole project. The reason being, they were based in Nairobi. There was a very huge population of South Sudanese refugees here. Majority of them had lost their husbands. So women were like, we've lost our husbands, we lost our children. So they used to come together and pray together just to see whether they can cope with the situation. So they approached the Evangelical Alliance and they say, we can do something. If not at the national level, let's do it at the community level. So they chose 3 areas. They said, we shall do community peace building work. And it's very specific. We shall only deal with the dialogues. Then they were creating what are called peace structures. That is the question. Somebody asked that. I think it was him who asked that question. If not him, it's Rolex. Who will continue? They said, if we have in every area that we go, we create something like a peace committee. So that whether we are there or not, in the event of anything, they are the ones to deal with the issues. So they train them, then they deploy them in the villages, in the particular areas. And so they were dealing with dialogues and the creation of peace committees. Dialogues and creation of peace committees, just to bring the community together. So that at least those from the same faith, those from the same denomination, at least can worship together. They can say, you are a Catholic, let's worship together. This war is not our war. So they chose 3 areas. They chose Juba City. Juba City happened to be a capital city, and when the war was at its worst in May, June 2015, that's where the largest number of massacres happened. Again, figures are disputed because in South Sudan, there was nobody to count the number of dead. But some people are saying 70,000 people are killed, and others are saying 100,000. So the figures are disputed. Nobody has the actual figure. So they chose Juba City as a capital city, and they want to bring people together. Then they choose an area called Bo, B-O-R, where Bo is a melting pot in South. That's where the Noel, the Dinka, the Pibol, and the other communities, the Mundari, and all the other communities, they meet there. It's a meet, and historically, that's where always massacres have always started. Even in 2013, it is the area that bore the worst brand of the war. That's where most of the killings happened. Even when the UN camp was attacked, it was attacking Bo first. So they chose the area because they needed to deal, just like in Burundi, they wanted to deal, at least communities can, even if they are in camps for the displaced, they can live together. So they chose Bo. And they chose the interfaith approach because they felt that is the only approach that can help. They have no other way. Now they were, the situation was desperate for them. The only way they can do it is just the interfaith. And let everybody understand we are all children of the same God, and all that approach. And the third area is called Yei River. And the reason why they choose Yei is because when the war was at its worst in the first civil war, 2013 to 2014, one of the combatants, which is called the SPLM, South Sudan People's Liberation Movement, in the opposition, they moved to the north. Then when the war was at its worst in 2015, instead of moving to the north, where Marshall came from, they moved to the south. So they passed through Yei on their way to Congo DRC. They needed to stage the war from there. So a lot of killings happened in Yei. So according to Pan-African Christian Women Alliance, Yei was an area where they needed to do all this community reconciliation, bringing people together and all that. So that's why they chose the three. So what was their approach? As I've mentioned, one, interfaith dialogue, use this Christian approach, bring all faith communities together, Christians, Catholic, Presbyterians, let them all be together, let them bring the community together, let them community understand that there is a war happening in South Sudan, yes. People have died, yes, but it is not our war, it's not our community war. So we can create our own islands of peace. We can have peace in Yei. Even if the Machar and Salva Kiir want to kill each other in Juba, they can continue, but let's have our own island of peace in Yei. And they did the same in Bo. So they were saying, let's have our own island. So they just focused on two things. One, creation of what are called peace structures or peace committees. I call them peace structures, but you can call them peace committees. And holding continuous community dialogues. So by the end of the day, you'll get this book because we have already documented some of these in this. So you'll see some nice photographs there about with the people at the trees. So you'll get this case study series, number 1, 2, and 3. So you'll see a lot of photographs there. You'll see them under the trees, the peace committees working at the trees, just to create small islands of peace in their communities. Why? Because the war at the national level is too difficult for them to deal with. Again, that is one of the common thinking in, that is what SACH does as well. One of the most common thinking in conflict transformation, that if you cannot solve it at the top, you have no way of doing it. If the UN has failed, the EU has failed, but we can create our own small islands of peace at the grassroots. So again, Elizabeth is not here. She should have talked more about now how they went about and answer some of the questions in the areas of the achievements and so on. But one of their biggest achievements was at least in places like Yei and in Juba City, they were able to bring the communities together. They reduced that tension between the communities. And the other one is that they were able to mainstream the evangelical approaches to the questions of peace. The third one, which they wanted to do, but they couldn't be able to do because it's very technical, was who was talking about trauma healing. I think it was Christian, or somebody talked about trauma and so on. Because there are two categories of trauma when you work in South Sudan. The first one is the individual. There are people who have this trauma, they have lived with it for this because of their killings. They have witnessed, they have witnessed their families being killed. And for those who don't know, South Sudan also had one of the highest rape cases during war. So they were using rape as a weapon of war. And it was so bad because they even raped UN officers, people who are working, some American and European women who are working in Juba, they were all raped in Juba City during 2014-2015 war. So, and in places like Bo, Marakal, and Bentiu, and also in Torit and Yei, a lot of women were raped because when the militias were raping, they were not attacking individuals, they were attacking communities. So they were using the female body as a battlefront. So that's another interesting question that would interest those who are doing gender work in peace conflicts, where the female body now became the battlefront. That if you are therefore unaware, they will say the Dinka, they killed our people. Therefore, if we kill and rape their women, then we have also attacked the Dinka. We are now destroying the Dinka's identity. And then the Dinka now would say the same. The Nuer are bad people. They are trying to overthrow our president. So if the best way to destroy them, let us also not just kill them, but also rape their women, all that. So the female body became the battlefront. It's not just a space out there, a battlefront. So these are heavy issues, but we thought, given the amount of money that we had, and the capacity, they didn't have the capacity to deal with this individual and mass trauma. But hopefully, the next round of projects that will come, it will be able to deal with these issues because they are very heavy issues. They require expertise, they require investment in time, and a lot of technical expertise. So are we together up to that point? So that's South Sudan. Elizabeth would have been here, should have answered a lot of these other questions. But basically, that's where under the CREED project, that's what they were doing. So I have just summarized exactly what they were doing. Because of time, I'm not sure if you talk about Kenya. I can only give Reverend talk about his work in Kenya for 5 minutes. Then we break out for lunch. But if there are any question on burning on South Sudan or Burundi, I can answer. I know he wants to say something. You want to ask something? Just hold on the Reverend. Yes.
Mine is just a comment in relation to Burundi and South Sudan, just asserting the fact that there's more need for trauma healing and mental well-being in our projects. Many participants are suffering, and I think it's something that going forward, maybe donors and other practitioners should actually really invest heavily on. We can talk about all these things, but deep down, if people's wounds are not healed, then we're not making those milestones that we would really want to make. So yeah, I agree with you. The trauma healing and mental support is very crucial.
So excellent point. When I was working for Amnesty International, one of the research that we did in South Sudan was on mental health, the mental health of the people. And we focused specifically in what we call Balgazal. It was in Pentu and the other areas, but it was very specific mental health and how it relates to the abuses of human rights, because there was so much violation of female bodies, such that it had become a mental issue. So we did a heavy research around that, and it's linkage. If you go to Amnesty website, you'll see it. I think that was the 2016 or something like that. Yes, because of time. 1 minute.
Thank you very much. It's difficult to speak in 1 minute. I just want to say that our organization is a local non-government organization registered here in Kenya. We work in the Coast region. And for the past 4 years, we've been implementing a program we call Freedom of Religion or Belief, FOB, in 2 counties of Kwale and Mombasa. These are areas which have a context of religious tension for a very long time. These are regions that have also been known to produce most of the youth who have joined the Al-Shabaab terrorist group in Somalia. And all that was instigated using religious ideologies to mobilize youth to go to war. 1, to fight the other, who are the Christians, and 2, to fight against government, which was perceived to be, the key perpetrator of human rights and the denial of services for the people. And so basically, we were working around building community voices, where at the local level, we were bringing community voices together to find common solutions, to find common connectors, and address jointly some of the government failure at the community level. So we worked with the youth, we worked a lot with the women, we worked a lot with the local grassroots religious leaders who really sit at the policy tables in Nairobi, where decisions are made, and basically bringing them together to find how they can solve solutions, how they can even, question government policies at the local level, but also promote good relationship and partnership between governments and society, because as you said, that's a region where the state-society relation has been very weak. And of course now, like my brother just talked about, we are linking those lessons learned to the new GISRA program, where we are also going to be working around, building community voices, again, at the intra-religious level, inter-religious level, and at the extra-religious level. One common, I would say, a big challenge we faced is actually the differentiating between religion and culture, and mostly culture, which is the one that has seen to be the origin of certain religions. For example, we have a problem delinking the Islamic culture and the Arabic culture, the Islamic teachings and the Arabic culture, where sometimes that confusion is actually what drives conflict. If I have time, I'll talk more about it.
So thank you so much for this. I think when it comes, you can see we are the last ones. When they come to questions of peace building and so on, we can talk glory until cows come home. And there are so much to talk about. Some of them are very interesting, others are very sad. Yeah, they make you very sad. In the case of the use of women bodies as battlefronts. And by the way, even in Kenya in 1920s, that was a battle here in Kenya. Yeah? If you followed the history of Kenya. So they are very sad, others are very interesting, but we have to talk about them because they cut across and we all have them. So thank you so much. I've not mentioned the Kenya Muslim Youth Alliance because they have a specific session in the afternoon. You will listen to them. Theirs is theirs only. They will be talking about their work.